Hello all and welcome, and I am Augustus. And in this video I would like to talk specifically about divination tools and even more specifically about the Ouija board, as that is the divination tool that is most well known by the majority of people, though it's not the only one out there. But for the purposes of this video, I will focus on that. So firstly, what you need to understand is what the Ouija board is not. Now, the Ouija board is not a toy. Yeah, I know it's sold in toy stores and it's marketed as a toy, but it's not a toy. But the majority of people, they don't understand what it is, its purpose. They don't believe in the occult world, and in turn, they don't take it seriously. Hence, the Ouija board is able to be sold to children in the form of a game. What's the purpose of selling it as a game to children? So as to corrupt our youth. But let me reiterate, it's not a game. So what is it then? It's a divination tool. It's a divination tool for contacting non-human entities. Now I know most people believe that it's for contacting the dead, but the last thing this device does is contact dead people. Now, I know that's what most people believe it's used for, but I have yet to see a case where it wasn't something else pretending to be a loved one who had passed or some other dead individual. But it was none of the above. It was something else entirely. The last thing that you would want to call and communicate with. That then begs the question, what is a divination tool? A divination tool is a device of a physical nature which acts as a conduit between whatever it is you're making contact with and the bearer of the divination tool itself. The divination tool allows the user or users of the device to open themselves up to an outside force so as to facilitate contact. Contact from the entity through the device to the user. In turn, the user becomes a tool through which the outside force can then communicate with us. Did you catch that part? A tool. That's right. You become a tool. Like a puppet. Sound good? No, it doesn't sound good to me either. So the person or persons using the device open themselves up to and give permission to whatever force they're communicating with to use their body to a certain extent for the sole purposes of communication. Now that's what you want. That's what your intention is. However, does that speak to the intent of that thing that you're communicating with? Sound like a bad idea? Messing with this stuff? Yeah, it's a bad idea to be sure. Now, in regards to the place that you are using a divination tool in, if the person or persons are in someone's home, you are, in essence, inviting that outside force you're trying to communicate with into your home. A very bad idea indeed. Inviting something in whose intent you can't be sure of. The place where you're supposed to feel and be the most safe. But because you're inviting in this outside force whose intentions you do not know or understand, it could possibly become the least safe place for you in the world. Bad idea. Now, in doing this, there's a worst case scenario, which is that you end up opening a portal. A portal that doesn't necessarily close once you're done with your communications. And what can come through portals that you can't see from a place you don't know anything about? I don't know. Doesn't sound good. Leaving an open door for whatever wants to come through into your home to come through in the future? Yeah, really bad idea. Now let's get into how the Ouija board and other divination tools work with a little more specificity. So the board itself acts as a physical conduit through which beings of a non-human nature can gain access to the user of the planchette so as to manipulate the planchette for the purposes of communication, which also requires the manipulation of the user of the planchette, that being you if you're foolish enough to use a Ouija board in the first place. Now, the entity you are communicating with, whatever its nature may be, uses the physical conduit as a bridge of sorts that gain access to the physical body of the user or users in varying degrees. Now, the degree of access and control gained is based to a certain extent on the strength of the entity itself, as well as the constitution and strength of the user or users of the divination tool, as well as the user's mental state. All of these factors and more play into just how much access the entity in question is able to gain over the user of the divination tool, and in turn, how much they can manipulate them. One thing, though, is crystal clear. Access to the user and their physical form is required, at least initially, to enable communication via the physical medium in question, that being the divination tool. By the way, this is why blindfolding a user of a Ouija board causes it to stop working in most cases. You see, the outside force needs the physical senses of the divination tool's user to manipulate the planchette. Therefore, if the person using it can't see, then the entity in most cases also cannot see. And yes, there are some cases of planchettes moving on their own and spelling out messages, but that's when the entity itself has more fully manifested into our realm. By the way, this is an extremely rare occurrence, as the main goal of using a Ouija board is not communication, but outright possession of the Ouija board's user by the non-human entity. As I said earlier, the Ouija board itself was marketed as a way to corrupt our youth. It's not a game. It's been disseminated and put into use based on people's curiosity, ignorance, and a total lack of belief in its efficacy. Because of this curiosity and ignorance and fascination with the paranormal, many a young person, and some very stupid older people as well, who believe it's wise to tempt fate, have employed it just to have a little fun. And let's see what happens. Yeah, real smart. And while most people experience nada, at least in the moment, others have had some very bad experiences indeed. I should also add that just because you use this device and experience nothing doesn't mean nothing has actually happened. Many a person has used a Ouija board or some other divination tool and had nothing occur at the time, yet days or weeks down the road, they started experiencing some unseen activity in their homes. This delayed effect is not uncommon. You should keep this in mind. Also, keep in mind that even if nothing occurs after using a divination tool, that doesn't mean you didn't unleash something. It could simply mean that whatever might have been unleashed didn't find you a particularly tempting target, so it went on its way to find easier prey. Regardless of the outcome of using a divination tool, each use allows potential negative entities to enter our realm and gain access to the person or persons who are foolish enough to dabble in such things, thereby opening those people up to possible demonic possession. Now, how does this possession occur? Well, when using divination tools, the user actually bypasses, on purpose, their own natural protections so as to facilitate contact. One of these natural protections is generically called our aura, which actually serves as a barrier against unseen negative forces. Again, divination tools act as a conduit. Let me give you a short analogy that makes it easier to understand. First, I want you to imagine a wall. Now, imagine the wall is so high and smooth that it's impossible to climb. And if an enemy wants to get past it, well, they're going to have to bash their way through it. A not so easy task. Now I want you to imagine a tunnel going underneath the wall, which completely bypasses the wall and allows you easy access to whatever's on the other side. Now, once you've imagined this scenario, you have a pretty good idea of how divination tools work. Just as the tunnel in the analogy I just mentioned allows enemies to bypass a wall in their path by simply going under it, divination tools allow the entity in question to gain access to the physical being of the user of the divination tool simply by using the tool itself as a bridge, as a tunnel, to easily access what's on the other side. Now, this brings me to another aspect of a divination tool's use, and that's the invitation, the invite. When you use a divination tool, what you're doing, in essence, is opening the door and saying welcome to a guest who's waiting outside. Welcome! Come on into my home. The use of the divination tool is the invite, and the divination tool itself is the door through your natural defenses, which the outside entity can then easily pass through to get to the inside of your home, which is actually the inside of you. Sound like a bad idea? Yeah, it's a really bad idea. So this, more than anything else, is why Ouija boards and other divination tools are so dangerous. They invite in what are almost always hostile forces and allow them easy access to the most vulnerable parts of the human self. This is why you can so easily find videos on YouTube and other video hosting platforms of people becoming possessed when using the Ouija board. The use of the device takes away the need of an outside force to break down a person's natural defenses through what is called demonic oppression, and instead allows the outside entity to jump right to the possession phase from the get-go. And I should add that no one is strong enough to not be affected at all when using such devices. Something may choose to leave you alone and go on its merry way, but if it so chose, it could affect you. As strong as you might think you are, or as much as you might think that your lack of belief and skepticism armors you against being affected by using such devices, know that you are mistaken. No one is immune. So in addition to being arrogant to dabble in such things because you believe that you're above such, or it can't affect you because you're too strong, you're also being incredibly irresponsible because doing such could potentially also place other people at risk. Now, personally, I recommend never using any kind of divination tools at all. The best thing that can happen is nothing, and the worst is horrible beyond imagining. Suffice it to say that playing games with loaded guns and thinking they're toys is never a good idea. And yes, I know many of you out there have probably watched a good amount, maybe a lot, of videos where paranormal investigators are employing Ouija boards for the purpose of communicating. That doesn't mean it's safe. That just means they're doing something stupid. It also should tell you all you need to know about the level of expertise that these people possess. As should what is oftentimes the consequence of their using the Ouija board. I've watched many of these videos as well, and usually the outcome is not desirous. What I've seen when people do this is increased, not decreased levels of activity, and in some cases, these so-called investigators have had something follow them home and then set up shop in their house. As I said, it's a bad idea to use divination tools. Anyhow, I hope this video has to some extent been informative in regards to what divination tools are, their actual purpose, and what the risks are in using them. Specifically the Ouija board in relation to this video, but generally all divination tools. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to utilize the comments section of this video, and I'll endeavor to answer any inquiries in a timely manner. And you can also email me at the address provided in the description. And that's it for this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you well. Take care.